More than 2 million residents have been warned to evacuate. After reaching areas that were cut off by the storm, Haitian officials have dramatically increased the number of fatalities. 108 people are now confirmed dead. The previous number was 23. Russia has issued a warning to the U.S. against attacking forces allied with the Syrian government. It's the latest sign of escalating tensions between Moscow and Washington. The Kremlin says strikes targeting government-controlled territories are a direct threat against Russians deployed in the area. By consensus vote, the United Nations Security Council today formally nominated Antonio Guterres to be the next Secretary General. Guterres spent 10 years as UN High Commissioner for Refugees. He says he wants to serve the most vulnerable.
The victims of conflict, of terrorism, the victims of the violation of rights, the victims of poverty and the injustices of this world.
The 193-member General Assembly is expected to approve Guterres' nomination next week. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,600 journalists and analysts around the world. Bloomberg Technology is next.
I'm Emily Chang, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, social media star Snapchat may be getting ready for the public markets. We'll bring you up to speed on what we know so far. Plus, does anyone want to buy Twitter? Shares fall more than 20% on reports that prospects for a deal are falling apart. And a rare interview with Cheng Wei, the founder and CEO of China's Didi Chuxing, how he won a turf war and took over Uber in Asia's biggest market. But first, to our lead. The flashiest tech IPO in more than a year is officially in the works as Snapchat prepares the paperwork to go public. According to people familiar with the matter, the company is aiming to sell shares in the first quarter of next year, possibly as early as March. But the timing is tricky, and sources cite three key factors that Snapchat's parent company, Snap, is watching. Joining me now from New York, our Bloomberg Businessweek reporter, Max Chafkin, with the latest. Max, you did a very in-depth feature on Snapchat. What do we know about their plans for an IPO? How soon?
What we know is a rough valuation. They're seeking $25 billion, which, if a lot of people in Silicon Valley have been worried that there's some sort of the air is being taken out of the bubble. I mean, that'll give a lot of confidence because it's a big improvement over their last valuation. The other thing is they're trying to do this quickly. It's pretty stunning when you think about just how fast Snapchat's moving. They only added these basic measuring features that most of their competitors have, like in the past weeks and months, and they just announced this glasses thing. I mean, they just changed their name to Snap Inc., which I think I just made a mistake there. But in any case, it's pretty wild just how fast this story has moved, and this IPO is just sort of like the latest thing in what's been kind of a crazy 6 months.
So why do you think they're going forward with this now? I mean, I know there are a number of factors out there that they've said will affect their timing.
Right. Well, I think so. Part of it, I think, is they're trying to seize on some momentum. Facebook's Instagram just knocked off the basic functionality of Snapchat. I think there must be concern about that, and you sort of want to like seize the moment right now. It's been really good, and the other thing is, again, Snapchat's kind of unproven. So there may be a thought that like we may as well get public now rather than sort of risk some problem in the private markets. If private funding were to dry up in the coming 12 months or 18 months, that could be a real problem for Snapchat if it weren't public. So I think it could be sort of a combination of seizing the moment, but also just trying to time the market.
Now, I spoke with Twitter investor Chris Sacca earlier this week, and the first thing he did when he saw me is Snap, not use Twitter, which he's been Twitter's biggest cheerleader for the longest time. Take a listen to what he had to say about Snapchat.
Snapchat is interesting in that what I think distinguishes it is less about the product and more about the product team. That's a company that's been willing and able to reinvent itself a few times now. They're just bold. They just take chances. And when they originally walked up to me after a talk I gave once and said, "We really love what you stand for. We love the way you work. We talk to other people, work with you. We want you in our deal." And I was like, they walked away, and I went home and I told my younger business partner, and he's like, "You said what?" And by the time we got back to Snapchat, they'd run away and done a deal with somebody else. It was a bummer. It probably cost us a few $1 billion.
So unfortunately for Saka, he didn't get in on that deal, but others did. You know, he's using the product innovation, the willingness to change as a positive, perhaps in comparison to Twitter, which, you know, hasn't changed. What do we know about the actual numbers here in terms of users and user growth and the actual market that Snapchat has been able to bite off?
You know, I don't have the numbers handy. I think we're talking about 150 million daily actives, which is a big number. I'm not sure. Twitter has been sort of squirrely about its daily users in the past, but I think most people believe that Snapchat is seeing, you know, much better engagement than Twitter. And when you consider that the way that Snapchat has grown and how young it is, like, that's pretty impressive. The other thing about Snapchat right now is it's just cool. And I think one of the things that we've learned, you know, from watching the evolution of these social networks over the past decade is that sort of thing matters. And Twitter really seems to be struggling just to retain users, to get people excited about it, whereas Snapchat, as Chris Saka is saying, I mean, they are just bringing out new products, new ideas, sort of these new shows constantly, and there's a, you know, I mean, there's a real sense of momentum.
Well, we'll see if cool is enough to spark public market investors. Our Bloomberg Business Week reporter, Max Chafkin, thanks so much for that update. We're going to continue the conversation tomorrow with Lightspeed venture partner Ravi Mehta. Lightspeed was the very first venture capital firm to back Snapchat. Turning now to tech M&A, because on one hand, Qualcomm is moving closer to a deal with the Dutch chipmaker NXP. People familiar with the matter say the two companies are making progress on price negotiations. Shares of both stocks rose in Thursday trading. On the other hand, of course, Twitter shares plunged the most since 2015 on reports that its prospects for a deal are falling apart. Joining us now for the latest on both stories, our Bloomberg News M&A reporter Alex Sherman in New York. So, Alex, let's start with Twitter. There's reporting now that Google and Disney are not making a bid for Twitter, that Salesforce may be the only suitor remaining. What do we know?
So it's not all that surprising that Google at this stage would say they're not bidding. Our initial reporting indicated that Google might not bid. And really, it doesn't make sense, I would argue, for Google to bid unless it knows someone else is going to do a deal for Twitter. Because I think Google is perfectly fine with an independent Twitter. They already have a search partnership there. You would think the reason they would want to buy Twitter is to secure that search partnership for the long haul. But if they felt like Twitter was going to be an independent company, there would be no need to buy Twitter. Disney, we broke the story that they were working with a financial advisor last week. We haven't been able to independently confirm that Disney is for sure out of this yet. So we don't know that one for sure yet. Rico did say Disney's not going to bid. I can confirm for you that Salesforce is still there. Salesforce has not backed down. I reconfirmed that today. So they are still taking a look at this. Not to say that a deal will get done necessarily, but maybe now Salesforce sees this potential transaction has actually moved in their direction advantageously. If they're the only bidder, they might be able to get Twitter for a lower price.
Now, let's say a deal doesn't get done. You know, after all of this speculation, where does that leave Twitter? Obviously, a potential acquisition had been priced in. Now we see the shares plunge.
Well, yeah, I would imagine if no deal gets done here, you can expect Twitter shares to fall even further than they already have, because the M&A premium that's been baked into that stock for months and months now will evaporate, at least for the time being. Knowing Twitter, the M&A speculation would probably come back around sooner rather than later. I think that there are a lot of people that are close to Twitter, either advisors to Twitter or people at the board level, that really do want to see a transaction get done. So even if no deal happens now, I wouldn't necessarily rule out that no deal would happen in 2017.
And quickly on Qualcomm NXP, we know the two sides are getting closer to an agreement on price. How soon could this happen?
So this one, from my reporting today, may actually happen sooner than you think. Originally, there had been reports that a deal might be 2 to 3 months away. Then we did a little bit of reporting on it on Friday. Now I'm hearing things have accelerated. The two sides have made pretty good progress. There's still a valuation gap, but it's less than 10%. From what I hear, NXP wants about $120 a share. Qualcomm, more like $110 a share. But the sides are making progress. There are active discussions. Qualcomm is the only potential suitor right now.
Okay.
So all of those reasons lead me to believe that we may actually see a deal get done, at least, let's say, in the next month or so.
Okay, our Bloomberg News deals reporter Alex Sherman. Alex, thank you so much for that update and your great reporting this week. Facebook is working on a new virtual reality product that is a step above the Samsung Gear VR, but not quite as powerful as Oculus Rift. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg told developers at an Oculus Connect conference Thursday that the company is aiming for a sweet spot between those products, but that it's not yet ready for launch. Zuckerberg also demonstrated avatars that can be customized to look like real people, read hand movements and expressions. The point one day is to give us all an identity in virtual reality as Facebook works on social software. Oculus has already spent $250 million on VR developers and is pledging $250 million more. Coming up, Xiaomi pushes into the U.S. with a 4K streaming gadget. We will hear from Global Operations Vice President Hugo Barra and Sling TV CEO Roger Lynch. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Tech. We're monitoring some breaking news headlines coming from the New York Post that Verizon is pushing for a $1 billion discount on its Yahoo acquisition. Of course, Verizon has agreed to buy Yahoo for $4.8 billion, but Yahoo now in the midst of a big hacking potential scandal involving information stolen from over 500 million accounts. This coming from the New York Post. Sources telling the New York Post will, of course, work to confirm this. But again, Verizon reportedly asking for a $1 billion discount on its deal for Yahoo. Turning now to streaming, a Xiaomi set-top box known as the Mi Box is now available in the United States. But China's fast-rising smartphone maker is entering a crowded space. From Apple to Google to Amazon, major tech players all have products that stream video to a TV. One thing that makes the Mi Box stand out, pre-installed Sling TV, which offers internet-based live TV. Here with me now in the studio, Roger Lynch and Xiaomi Vice President of Global Operations in town from Beijing, Hugo Barra. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Hi, Emily.
So, Hugo, I'll start with you. Why get into this market when, obviously, there are a lot of players here already?
Well, you know our company well, right. and our mantra, the way we do business, our DNA is what we call innovation for everyone. Mm-hmm. Right? It's this idea of bringing cutting-edge technology to everyone by making products in very large scale and selling them at a very small margin. We saw an opportunity here in the US to disrupt this particular connected living room space with this model, and that's why we brought Mi Box. We're doing it in partnership with Google and with Sling TV, and we're here because this cord-cutting phenomenon seems to be going mass market. So I think this is the right time to enter this space.
Now, Roger, Sling is, of course, available on these other devices, but if you go with the Mi Box, you get a discount. How many subscribers does Sling have, and how many new subscribers do you expect this to drive?
Emily, we don't release these numbers since we're part of Dish Network. Those numbers are released as the total subscribers that Dish and Sling have. But we're excited about this launch of Mi Box. I think Xiaomi is shown to be a real tough innovator in China, and I think this has been a launch that people have been looking forward to and been excited about, and we are too.
Will the Sling app on Mi Box work with voice commands? How will this work?
It's a fully integrated experience. So one of the innovative things that we're doing with Xiaomi is actually when you launch the box as a new purchaser of the box, it'll launch right into the Sling TV app with live TV.
Yeah, our thinking on this, Emily, is what you hear people talk about all the time. I don't watch TV anymore. Why do I have a cable subscription? Well, people do watch a lot of TV. In fact, video content consumption is at a rise, but they want to be their own programmer.
Right.
But then you're like, well, but I'm going to buy an OTT box, a streaming box, but then what about my cable service? Do I lose that? Well, what we've done by working with Sling TV is put your cable subscription as an internet service inside of the box, right? So what you get is what you had before, except you no longer need a cable subscription. And we've done it in an interesting way. This is so important for the product story, for why people would want to buy this product, that out of the box, when you power on Mi Box for the first time, you connect to Wi-Fi, you go directly into live television, almost as if it was a cable box. We have a special arrangement with Sling whereby during that first day, you get to watch live TV entirely for free without a paywall, so you can really know how well it works.
Now,
how well it replaces your box.
Cord cutting is obviously on the rise, but it's interesting because in China, live streaming is huge. It's far bigger than it is in the United States. And I'm wondering, Hugo, if you could describe that for me a little bit and how you expect live streaming in the US to evolve. How will it get there?
Yeah, so it's an interesting blend of the old and the new. But live streaming in China has taken over both for big events, which is sort of something that we already know, but the personal live streaming of you, live streaming yourself is a big trend as well. We'll see how much of that translates into the US. I think what's more interesting over the next couple of years in the US are the big live things that you would only catch on your regular television now being available much more easily, both live as well as on demand later. There's unbundling trends at play here as well that will accelerate this trend.
Roger, how do you see the market evolving?
It's, the pay TV market in the US is really in a state of transition.
Right.
If you look back 5 years ago, pay TV penetration of occupied households was around 88%, and today it's down close to 80%. And so we can see these shifts happening where consumers are moving to more streaming. They're putting together their own bundles with different services that weren't available before. So I think we're just at the beginning of a long secular shift that we're going to see, moving to streaming.
Google unveiled Google Home earlier this week. Will Sling work on that?
We look to work on every device that people have. It's very important for us to be on every major streaming device that people are using in the home.
Now, Hugo, you can order this online, but you can also buy it at Walmart. And I'm curious if that's an indication of how we might see future Xiaomi products available.
We'll see. We're here one disruptive product at a time. Obviously, this is the first one. We think this category is poised for disruption. Yeah. We wanted a wide reach retail partnership, and Google actually brought us into Walmart because they've known retail channels really well here in the US for some time. So one retail channel is sort of enough for us to start with. We chose a very wide reach one, and obviously we'll go from there.
All right, and of course you used to work at Google for a very long time, so I'm going to ask you in the next block what you think of what they announced this week. Hugo Barra, you're sticking with me, Vice President of Global Operations for Xiaomi. Sling TV CEO Roger Lynch, thank you so much for stopping by. Great to have you. Coming up, we're going to dig into Xiaomi's other products and smartphone competition. We'll be right back. This is Bloomberg. Walmart is boosting its stake in JD.com, nearly doubling its ownership to just under 11%. The increased holding is a move to strengthen an alliance to win more market share in the world's largest online market. Walmart is tapping JD's digital resources to help it succeed in China, where it estimates that a quarter of global retail growth will come from in the next 5 years. The retail giant's been spending big on e-commerce to compete with Amazon. Walmart just snapped up e-commerce startup Jet.com last month. And competition in the global smartphone market continues to heat up. Xiaomi recently revealed its most premium device, the Mi 5S Plus, in hopes of challenging Apple and Samsung. This is its new phone. But just this week, Google emerged as another serious contender with the launch of its Pixel handsets. All of this as the smartphone market reaches saturation. Xiaomi Vice President of Global Operations Hugo Barra with me here still in the studio. And of course, you ran Android at Google for a long time, Hugo. So I'm so curious to know what you think of the new phones and the fact that Google is now making its own phones end to end.
I had the chance to try the Pixel and the Pixel XL yesterday. I was on campus and I was able to play with it myself. Very impressive. I'm a big fan. I think, to me, the most important thing Google is doing here is brand. Right? This is the first time that we're seeing a phone with a big G in the back. We've been talking about the Google phone for years, but the Google phone was never the Google phone. Now it finally is.
Do you consider this competition?
For sure, it is competition, right? I'm delighted because I think this is the kind of move that will shake up the industry, potentially in more ways than one.
How?
Well, it is a different kind of innovation, right? I think Walt Mossberg put it really nicely when he called the Pixel a vessel for AI. Right? This is precisely, I think, the future of innovation in this segment. We've been seeing, display innovation, battery innovation, camera innovation for a long time. Of course, those will continue, but I think where the real user experience differential will come from in the future is precisely the sorts of things that we're seeing Google do right now.
Would you consider using the Google Assistant in Xiaomi phones?
We do. I mean, to a certain extent, we already do. We ship voice search in Google Now on all of our phones sold outside of China. Obviously, once Google makes the Assistant, which is sort of the next generation, if you will, of voice search in Google Now available, we are obviously very interested in using it as well. I'm a big fan.
So let's talk about the new Mi phone.
All right.
This is, your state-of-the-art, your highest-end phone. Of course, Apple just came out with its new iPhones. Samsung is having some issues, which we'll get to. But what makes you think that this can, sort of reinvigorate smartphone growth at Xiaomi?
So this is our latest flagship. It's called Mi 5S, and it's a 5-inch device with a super crisp display. It has a couple of interesting innovations. One of them is the way you unlock the phone. We're using an under-glass fingerprint recognition technology. So instead of having a physical button or a surface that has a discontinuity, it's just a piece of glass with a little dimple so that you can find it when you're not looking. But it's the first time someone is using this kind of technology, which makes it faster, more elegant, obviously looks much better too, as you can see here. And then the other thing that we're doing also is the camera sensor that we're using. This is a new 1.55 micron large pixel camera sensor. It coincidentally is the same sensor we think that's being used on the Pixel.
What's your take on the Samsung issues? Have you guys seen any impact from that? I mean, this, obviously massive global recall. People, could potentially end up switching to Xiaomi or other brands because of it.
It is a really big issue. It is potentially very significant backlash. We are one of the biggest innovators in battery technology. We were the first ones, potentially even the only ones, to talk about the density specification of our batteries, because we are probably the leading player in China and in India on how much juice we can get out of a certain battery volume. And battery technology is extremely complex. You really do have to test it a lot, and we do. We haven't encountered these kinds of issues. I think we'll get past this, and hopefully they'll recover. They'll get their brand back. It's really perhaps a small mistake that will cost them dearly, but I don't think that this is a long-term problem.
And we have 15 seconds left, but I know that you've said that it's really the supply issues that are impacting the Xiaomi growth numbers. When do you see the supply being able to meet the demand for Xiaomi phones quickly?
Yeah, so our supply chain is being reinvigorated every day. We are seeing more demand than we've ever had before, and we're doing everything we can to continue to go larger and larger scale.
All right.
Long term.
Hugo Barra, Vice President of Global Operations at Xiaomi. Always wish we had more time with you, Hugo. Thank you so
Likewise.
much
Thanks,
for
Emily.
stopping by. Great to have you. Coming up, the leader behind the Chinese ride-hailing giant Didi may not be a household name yet. Well, it is in China, but maybe he should be. Cheng Wei. We'll be talking about him next.
I'm Mark Crumpton. You're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's begin with a check of your first word news. Federal investigators confirm a New Jersey transit train that plowed into a terminal in Hoboken last week was traveling at twice the speed limit. They also say the engineer hit the brakes just before impact. Transit officials say the damaged train is ready to be removed. One person was killed and more than 100 others injured. A senior member of Britain's UK Independence Party remains hospitalized after what officials call an altercation with a colleague. Stephen Wolfe suffered 2 seizures after the incident and fell unconscious at the European Parliament in Strasbourg, France. The name of the other party member has not been released. Authorities in India have arrested 70 people and are questioning hundreds more in a scam targeting thousands of Americans. Mumbai police say the suspects posed as tax authorities, even running fake call centers, then contacted U.S. nationals demanding they settle back taxes. Officials say the scam brought in as much as $150,000 a day. Pakistani lawmakers have passed legislation increasing penalties for so-called honor killers. It closes a loophole that often allowed offenders to go free. More than 1,000 women were killed last year, often by fathers, brothers, or husbands. The law mandates a 25-year prison sentence to anyone convicted. I'm Mark Crumpton. It's just after 6:30 p.m. Thursday here in New York, 9:30 Friday morning in Sydney. Paul Allen has a look at the markets. Paul, good morning.
Good morning, Mark. Looks like another down day on the NZX, currently open for 90 minutes and off 0.4%, rounding off a pretty disappointing week on the New Zealand exchange. Things are expected to be a little brighter here in Australia, though. Futures indicating a rise of 1/3% at the open in just under half an hour's time. Nikkei futures right now looking mixed. A couple of stocks worth watching in Japan today, namely Seven & I Holdings. They're planning to divest struggling department stores and potentially set up a real estate division. And Japan Tobacco has announced a $500 million e-cigarette production plan based in both Japan and China. The big one today, though, is going to be Samsung releasing a third quarter preliminary earnings guidance. This is the first look at how Samsung is doing earnings-wise since the well-publicized problems with the exploding Note 7s. If we take a look at Samsung's share price, though, you just see that little dip towards the end there so far has been dealing pretty well with the fallout from that problem. But we'll get a little more news from Samsung in just under an hour's time. I'm Paul Allen in Sydney. More of Bloomberg Technology next.
This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. Now, you may have heard of Travis Kalanick at Uber, even Jean Liu of DiDi, but what about Cheng Wei, also known as Will, or the Uber Slayer? Well, he's someone you should know. The Chinese tech billionaire and CEO of DiDi Chuxing successfully won a turf war with Uber and turned his ride-hailing app into a global force. Cheng sat down for a rare interview with Bloomberg Businessweek's Brad Stone and is featured on the cover of the latest issue of Bloomberg Businessweek. Brad just got back from Beijing, here to tell us all about it. So tell us about this guy. He's very different from Travis, but also similar.
Well, similar in some ways that we'll get to. But 4 years ago, he's basically a middle manager, a sales guy inside Alibaba. He breaks off to do this thing. He's competing against 30 other Chinese ride-sharing startups. He then goes head-to-head with another one called Kuaidi, which is being backed by Alibaba. He merges, but basically wins that battle, and then head-to-head with Uber. And now they've done this peace deal over the summer. Uber has agreed to leave China, but again got 17% of DiDi. So he's a battler.
So yeah, what is it about? I know he's interested in military history. He led the battle with Uber like a war.
Well, it's funny because at Uber's headquarters down Market Street, Travis calls the main conference room the war room. There must be something about these guys where the military point of view ends up being a successful one. So sure, Cheng Wei is very interested in military history. He talks about famous battles in World War II. He called his morning meeting during the battle with Uber the Wolf Totem, based on a famous novel and movie that really connotes aggression. It was about a student studying wolves in Inner Mongolia. And look, it's an intensive kind of business. And so that sort of outlook ended up being valuable.
So he's taken out two big players, but is the fight over? At least in China.
Well, there's some local players. There's a one called Yao Yao, sort of a lift of China. And then, the landscape's changing now, and it's going to move to driverless cars and other forms of alternate transportation. And then, of course, there's the world outside of China. And, DiDi hasn't agreed not to expand outside China. And he did tell us that he thought that maybe DiDi and Uber would end up competing in some other countries. So by no means is the competition over.
Where's DiDi on driverless cars? Obviously, we know Uber has now a fleet on the ground, small.
Frankly, who isn't in driverless cars these days? And just in China, Baidu's made a big investment. So my sense is that DiDi is just getting started. They're trying to make some key hires. Cheng Wei said somewhat humbly, maybe we'll surprise you. But I think like Uber, they've got data and people have DiDi apps on their phones. And, that's a big head start.
And what about profitability? Obviously, both DiDi and Uber lost a lot of money taking each other on. But now that that's calmed down, they've gotten rid of some of the subsidies. How close are they to turning this into a profitable operation?
We'll probably see next year when they file to go public. But I would say right now they're probably not close. A big part of their business is facilitating yellow cabs in China. That's still probably a majority of the business, and they hardly make any money on that at all. And we talked to some drivers and some riders last week in Beijing, and they were all complaining that fares have gone up. and discounts and perks for drivers have gone down. And it's Didi, like everyone else, trying to rationalize their business. And so I expect the economics will improve, and then we'll get a look at the underlying profitability of the business.
All right. Well, fascinating profile there. You can check it out in this week's edition of Bloomberg Business Week. Brad Stone, our global tech editor, thanks so much for sharing that with us. A stock we are watching, Coupa Software, surged in its first day of trading on the NASDAQ. This after the company priced its shares at the high end of an increased range. It's been a slow year for IPOs, but the move suggests a strong appetite for tech offerings. Bloomberg's Carol Masser and Corey Johnson spoke to Coupa CEO Rob Bernstein and asked what investors could expect from the company in coming months. Take a listen.
We had a great reception from investors across the country, and what they could expect is for my team and I to continue driving our organization further and further. And we do that by focusing on our customers, ensuring their success, and driving measurable value for them, greater profitability, more visibility, better compliance through our cloud spend management platform.
This weekend on Bloomberg, we will bring you all our best interviews from the week, including our interview with GoPro CEO Nick Woodman as the company revamped the Hero 5, and that hits store shelves. The best of Bloomberg Tech this weekend on Bloomberg Television. Up next, how cloud-based tools are unlocking new frontiers in the way we work. This is Bloomberg. Apple is consolidating its efforts in cloud services, combining the teams working on Siri, Maps, iCloud, Apple Pay, Apple News, Apple Music, even parts of iTunes into one location at Apple's flagship Infinite Loop campus in Cupertino. These groups currently work separately in various different office parks, something that's been blamed for software bugs and slower product development. The reorganization comes as Apple hopes to grow its services business and compete with Google and Amazon in the cloud. Meantime, advances in cloud infrastructure have enabled major changes in the way people work. File sharing and team communication have helped teams work remotely, and a crop of enterprise software startups are trying to address pain points for businesses across the economy. But what does the future of work look like, and what is the next generation of workers looking for? Joining me now, Dropbox Vice President of Engineering, Aditya Agrawal, and April Underwood, Vice President of Product at Slack. Thank you both so much for being here. I'm fascinated with this topic because, you know, from the way office spaces look to the technology we use, it's all going to change, and I wonder how you think it's going to change. April, let's start with you. The office space. What looks different in, let's say, 10 years?
Different lighting. No, I mean, I think that the office space, and I think that really the experience of work has a lot of similarities with today, but I think that a lot of the constraints are being removed. You know, people have the opportunity to work in a more distributed fashion, not necessarily all in the same physical space. They have the ability to work at different hours, and also the global aspect of the economy sort of necessitates that. But, you know, more importantly, I think that there's an increased appreciation for really allowing employees to have the agency and really the flexibility to choose the work style that works best for them. And so that's one of the things that obviously we're focused on at Slack, which is that even though those constraints may be removed, you know, people still need a place to go to get work done. And when they open Slack, they are at work, and it really enables them to actually still be able to communicate with each other, but also work with a wide variety of software and do that across geographies, across time zones, and be able to do that in a really efficient way.
It's interesting, Aditya, because some people say that actually productivity hasn't changed very much, even though how we get stuff done and the amount of flexibility we have has actually changed a lot. How would you respond to that?
So I think that we have made an incredible amount of technological progress over the last 20 or 30 years. But at the same time, what we have seen is that the amount of information and the amount of communication has increased actually way faster than technology has been able to keep up with, especially in the workplace. And add to that the fact that if you kind of look at how productivity software was built for the last 20 years, it was on a shrink-wrap software lifecycle, which means that over 20 years, we got 10 shots on goal. Whereas Slack and Dropbox get 10 shots on goal every day. That's our pace of experimentation. And I think that the other thing that has changed is that we are building for the user, not for the buyer. Because historically, you would actually have to build for the people who are purchasing the software, not for the people who are building the software, for using the software, which meant that low iteration cycles, as well as essentially not building for the user. Once you remove those constraints, I actually think we're going to see a ton of productivity gains over the next 20 years.
So, April, what are the biggest pain points you guys are trying to address? I mean, obviously, I know email is a big one. Do you think email is going to go away ultimately?
Well, I think people always need ways to communicate with people outside their organization. And, you know, email is great because anyone can email one another, but that's also one of its major downsides. And so, you know, the main problems that Slack solves are it brings increased transparency to organizations so that the conversations that happen between two individuals that may actually be of value now or 6 months from now or a year from now are available to other individuals within the organization. So Slack brings that transparency by really organizing conversation around work around topics and allows people to harness sort of the power of that archive. But it also really brings sort of a lot of new elements that make workplace communication just more tuned to the needs of the individual user. So notifications that allow you to tune into the things and stay the most plugged into the topics that are critical to your work. But we're just getting started. So I mean, I think artificial intelligence, a lot of the things that we could do to help elevate the most important topics and connect the right people to one another, as well as the right tools, software applications, and so forth, is that's still to come. So we feel like we're in an early stage of this major transformation around workplace communication and productivity, and we think Slack's an important part of that, but it's just the beginning.
Let's talk about AI at Dropbox. How do you see AI? How do you intend to use AI to improve work, to improve productivity?
Yeah, I think that we are still in the early days of actually applying AI to productivity and collaboration software. And it's kind of crazy that in the last 10 years, we've made so much advances in AI, but the things they're used for today are to rank the ads that you see, to rank the search results that you get, as well as to rank the recommendations that you have on Amazon. But I can't actually think of one actually super important or super useful application of it at the workplace. So I can't tell you the secrets that we're working on there, but I think we have a lot of interesting things going on.
Now, of course, there is competition out there. The Information wrote a piece about Facebook trying to create a Slack competitor and reported that they were peddling their own AI as a way to perhaps gauge sentiment at work, gauge how employees are feeling about certain things. What was your response to that piece?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised to see that there is more competition in this space because it's what we're trying to solve with Slack is a really widespread problem. And people spend so much time searching for information, communicating with each other, and then there's been a proliferation of software. There are more new types of software that help people do their work better than ever before. They need to talk to each other. They need to work together. And so that's one of the things that we enable. So I'm not surprised to see that there are more companies coming in this space. In fact, there are plenty of other companies in Dropbox's space, and yet they're a very successful company. And so, so I'm not. So we're not surprised by that. A lot of the products that we hear rumors about, we haven't actually seen yet. And so I think it's really early to say exactly, whether one of these other products is going to be, a really meaningful swing at this. But if we go back in history, IBM probably didn't anticipate that some hippies from Microsoft were going to be able to be really competitive with them, and it turns out, of course, Microsoft was. Google has run into that around social with Facebook, and then now there are applications like Snapchat that are just taking the world by storm. So I think there's always room for new entrants, and we're actually trying to enable that further with our platform by creating the ability to help work teams actually find new software applications. And so we're not just sort of at that forefront of actually coming at this in a new way, but we're actually enabling the next generation of software developers.
And Aditya, obviously, again, lots of competition in your market as well, and you guys have been, trying to take on bigger and bigger businesses. And I'm curious, what goes into designing a product for 10 people versus 10,000 people in a single organization?
Right, I think one of the big mental model changes that we have made is that instead of thinking of it as a 10,000 person enterprise, we tend to think of it as 1,000 10-person teams. Like in terms of how do we get bottoms-up adoption, how do we get viral growth, and how do we really get essentially a team, a big behemoth, to really think of itself as a collection of loosely organized, nimble and fast and flexible teams. And if you can crack that nut, then you can actually rely on a lot of the bottoms-up adoption that I think companies like Slack and Dropbox are seeing.
Last question to both of you about millennials. I'm curious what they want, what you think they want, and how you design products for them.
Well, I think one thing that millennials value is self-expression, and I was at Twitter for 5 years before this, so obviously, everything we've seen in social reflects that. But I think one of the things that we bring with Slack is we bring personality into the workplace, and that we find that actually personality is not a distraction; it's an enabler. It's an enabler for teams to work well together and for individuals to do their best work. So that's just one of the many ways in which I think millennials will have the expectation both to be able to bring that personality, but also they're just going to expect that software at work is easy to use. The trainings that we used to go through to learn how to use software in the workplace, that's just going to seem like it's completely from outer space to this generation that's never lived without the internet, and that's where I think products like ours come in.
You're nodding vigorously.
Yeah, simple, delightful, zero training cost. I think that the amount of disparity between consumer software and software at work still continues to be so high, and that's really the hurdle that we need to cross over the next 10-20 years.
All right. Aditya Agrawal, Dropbox Vice President of Engineering, April Underwood, Head of Product at Slack. Thank you both. Looking forward to the future as you describe it. Up next, could the biggest known company hacking of all time put Yahoo's $4.8 billion purchase price in jeopardy? We will discuss next. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. You can listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg. watching. Alphabet's health tech company Verily Life Sciences is joining the fight against the Zika virus. Verily has developed machines and sensors to automate the breeding and sorting of sterile mosquitoes or male mosquitoes that can't reproduce. That's long been considered a strategy for getting mosquito populations under control and limiting the spread of Zika, among other viruses. In an interview with Bloomberg, Verily's head of engineering said Verily doesn't yet have a business model in mind for this project, but it's confident that such a large economic burden as mosquito-borne disease can create a sustainable business. Turning back now to the major tech deals in the works, we are diving into a report that Verizon wants a $1 billion discount on its deal to buy Yahoo after reports of a major hack attack. This according to the New York Post. AOL boss Tim Armstrong flew to the West Coast in the past few days to meet with Yahoo executives to discuss the price reduction, according to this report. Joining me now here in the studio, our editor-at-large, Corey Johnson. And Corey, you spoke with Tim just last week.
Yeah.
What was his take on this?
Well, so we had a long conversation as part of the Adweek conference in New York City early last week. And we talked a little bit about this. He, of course, didn't want to say anything. And, of course, I kept asking him about it. And one of the things that we learned from him was that yes, they do have a window for, well, the order of events. Yahoo got hacked. Yahoo knew it got hacked. Long pause. Yahoo says, Verizon, by the way, we were hacked before we agreed to do this merger with you.
We don't know how long the pause was.
But we know that Yahoo was well aware of this and did not disclose it as part of the merger. And we know that people who have looked at the document say they should have disclosed this and they should have been required to disclose that. So that's a big problem for these guys as they try to complete this merger because it's really supposed to be something that they should have disclosed. The result is, I pressed him and I said, do you have a right to renegotiate? And what he danced around was the notion that if the value of the deal has changed, then they should have a right to renegotiate the deal. Furthermore, he said, but I asked him, is it possible that such a hack could happen and there's no damage to the underlying property? And he says, there are a lot of companies, and I said, like Target? He said, like Target. There's a Target down the street from my house. I believe it's probably well down the street from his house. There's a Target down the street from my house, he says, and the parking lot looks pretty crowded to me. So the suggestion is that yes, there could be damage to the underlying product, but maybe not that much.
Is there any precedent for a price change?
Absolutely. On hacking, no. On products being damaged and companies being aware of it, it's a false conveyance. It happens all the time in the debt markets, and it's happened quite often in mergers where the underlying company, their prospects have changed, and so it's toast afterwards.
All right, Qualcomm NXP getting closer to a deal.
Okay, so Qualcomm NXP, I want you to think about this in a couple of different ways. One is in terms of gross margins. We have a chart I think we put together that shows the difference in the gross margins between these two companies. Maybe we do, maybe we don't know if we can fire it up. Maybe we don't.
Tell us
but I will tell you about the chart. So they're both enormously profitable companies when it comes to gross margins. And the gross margins for Qualcomm, however, are a lot better. So if you put these two companies together, and Dana Curtis did do a great chart for us, I want to thank him even if we can't. If you put these two companies together, what's going to happen fundamentally is that the numbers are going to come down, that the margins are going to come down from a merged company because Qualcomm's margins are better than NXP's. But NXP gives Qualcomm a way to get into the automotive business that they haven't really had an opportunity to go to. So when we think about the notion of self-driving cars, whether it's going to be through a company like a Tesla or this new company called Ford or Chrysler or Chevy or Ferrari or whomever, as cars become more complex electronic vehicles and the chips go from being simple analog semiconductors, not quite to central processing units like you see in a PC or in a phone, but maybe something in between, NXP is in a really good position, particularly after their Freescale acquisition, to let Qualcomm have access into that world.
All right, we've got a minute left to talk about Twitter.
It's hardly enough time.
Google and Disney,
We'll try.
apparently off the table. Salesforce maybe still there. We don't know about any other suitors.
Right.
The stocks dropped 20%.
So top line growing so fast for Twitter. It looks very tight. Look, Disney would love to have a 20% year-over-year growing business on the top line. Who wouldn't? But what we see with Twitter is the slowdown in user growth is so important. And I think when companies look at this, and I'm sure any company who might have been able to kick the tires, if they get any more information on the company, they would do it. They look at this business, it's only growing users at what, 1% year over year.
But ESPN is losing users. I mean, not all businesses continue to grow as fast as tech businesses.
1% isn't the tech business growing fast at all. 1% is a cable business that's 40 years old growing. 1.5% in its biggest market is pathetic growth for any company of any size. I mean, you could sell tires and grow it faster than that. You don't have to pay a tech valuation to do it.
Corey Johnson, our editor-at-large, as always, thank you so much for breaking it down. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Tech. We will, of course, keep following all of those deals or potential deals. Tomorrow, we'll sit down with Cloudflare CEO Matthew Prince to wrap up the week in cybersecurity. And a reminder, check out our new website for everything you need to know around the world in tech. This is Bloomberg.
Studios in New York City. This is Charlie Rose.
The sole vice presidential debate took place last night at Longwood University in Virginia. With only 33 days until the election, Governor Mike Pence and Senator Tim Kaine argued their candidates' positions on Syria, Vladimir Putin, and abortion and other issues. The consensus among analysts was that Governor Pence delivered a stronger performance, but struggled to defend Donald Trump. The second of three presidential debates will be held this Sunday at 9 p.m. Joining me now from Washington, Mike Allen of Politico, Jonathan Chait, a columnist for New York Magazine. His forthcoming book is called Audacity: How Barack Obama Defied His Critics and Transformed America. Here in New York, Dan Senor. He has served